All join me today for the Belgium Grand Prix. It's all starting off very, very suddenly as unfortunately opportunity. Let's take a look at the standings. So Jaguar currently leading the championship at the moment with 71 points, doing pretty well out there for himself. Meanwhile, in P2, not too far behind, is Rob. We have Saeed with 29 points, and P5 going to Cassell with 28. The rest of the top 10 would be Trems, Crofty, Julio or Julio. Apparently, I've been calling him CL the entire time. It's actually CI, but I'm going to keep calling him CL. CL and Bambino rounding off your top 10, and that will be your driver standings. Let's take a look at the constructor standings now while we have the opportunity to. Alpine currently leading the championship with 75 points, but followed closely behind by Ferrari with 67. In P3, we have AlphaTauri with 51 points. In P4, we have Mercedes with 44. And in P5, we have Alfa Romeo with 40. And the rest of the top 10 would be Red Bull, Aston Martin, Williams, Haas, and McLaren as follows. So, still not halfway through the season just as yet, and things are shaping up very, very nicely in the championship. And today, we go to a track well-renowned among the F1 circuit. It is, of course, Spa, as I quickly begin to set up all the details, and we already have a car out on track at the moment. And it seems to be Mr. Golden Flame. So while we have the opportunity to, let us discuss the track. So obviously, in qualifying now, we already see that there's no wet conditions in the area. It looks like we're going to have a clear qualifying here today. And hopefully that's how it plays out to be. You're going to be looking at about a minute 40s. Not minute 40s, but a minute 42, 43, somewhere around that mark. Regardless, there's a massive elevation changes, of course, very well known throughout this circuit, and it's a bit of a mix between having a good balance of downforce and a good top-end speed, because you have these fast corners and these long straights that come up that allow for great overtaking opportunities. Two DRS zones, one going through the start-finish straight, of course, and then the other one past Eau Rouge, which is, of course, one of the most renowned corners here on the F1 calendar. But we're right on board with Mr. Golden Flame as he's coming towards the end of Sector 2. Obviously, incredibly long laps here. So it's going to be a whole lot of yapping in store for this race. Something important else to note is that the barriers are, of course, very close to the track on certain areas. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a bunch of safety cars come out, or virtual safety cars coming out through the course of this race. And now we're right on board. Mr. Golden Flame now beginning the first time lap here in qualifying, and riding on board with him, coming through turn one. It's so easy to lose the car on so many of these corners. If you just ride the curb a bit too much, your car is just going to get massively unsettled. And even through Eau Rouge, if the drivers don't have the correct setups in store, then they could be looking at a few loose rear ends. But no, Mr. Golden Flame looks like he's got it right down the money, sticking it as close to the right as possible to minimize the time. And now he's coming through the first DRS zone that isn't the start finish straight, and manages to, of course, set a purple sector 1. To that being granted, he is the first car out on track. And here's a very tight and twisty section of the circuit. Of course, you have to be very careful as to not ride those curves too much, or it will massively unsettle your car. But it looks like he's kept it extremely nice and tidy, but unfortunately for him, goes wide on that corner. A place where we'll probably be seeing a lot more track invalidations, and that's unfortunately going to be the end of the run for Mr. Golden Flame. For now. But we'll bring our attention towards Robin, who's just come through Eau Rouge and now is coming down the DRS straight. We saw 30.0, but Robin, of course, managing to set a 30.3. And now we'll see how he fares in comparison to Mr. Golden Flame. We saw that he was absolutely pushing here. Robin seems to be a bit more reserved this time around. It doesn't seem like he's really tackling those corners at full speed. And now Robin does not invalidate his lap time over there. So I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more invalidations. But now coming through this fast left-hander. So easy to unsettle the car if you ride those curves just a little bit too much. But Robin keeps it nice and steady. Either that's a Williams or an Alpine, I'm not entirely too sure. Robin a bit squirrely on the exit of that corner. Wouldn't be too happy for that, because it's going to ruin his run heading down this long, it's not a straight, but flat out section of the track. Sector 3 being almost entirely flat out until the final chicane, which Robin is about to reach right now. Heavy braking zone, and now into the chicane. being the first car out on track to set the benchmark. Robin extremely squarely on the exit of that corner, comes across the line, sets a 1 minute 42.5. Not too sure if he's going to be too pleased with himself over there. We can see Blurry now setting a 142.509, managing to take provisional pole, and now Kepler coming across the line sets a 143.5 as well. 3 drivers in a stretch setting a 143. Samet, unfortunately, who's invalidated his lap time. Bambino now being one of the next few drivers to cross the line, comes across the track, sets a 141.7, and becomes the first driver to enter the 141s, almost a second faster than the rest of the grid. A fantastic lap time from him. Joker Psycho coming across the line with a 143.1, nothing too damaging from him, but Saeed now coming towards the end of his run. Riding those curbs a bit more than he may have wanted to. DRS wide open, and now Saeed Al-Falasi comes across the line, sets a 142.8, and that places him respectfully right behind his teammate in P5, Robin. The only driver at the moment who's now out on a run as it seems, is Cassell, who's currently in P13, has not set a lap time for himself as of yet. And a few drivers currently out on their outlaps, both the Mercedes drivers. A bit separated far from each other. We'll see if they allow each other to catch up. And utilize that slipstream. Mr. Golden Flame seems to be out on his second run as well. Seems like Cassell maybe did come across the line, but didn't actually manage to set a lap time for himself. Or maybe he is pushing. I'm not entirely too sure. It does definitely look like he's pushing. We'll ride on board with him just for the sake of it, just to see how his run progresses. A lot of drive. Oh, and that's unfortunately going to be it. Cassell unfortunately invalidates his lap time, and that's going to be the end of his run. That was rather quick. A lot sooner than a lot of us would have expected. And that is exactly what seems to have happened. The Silver Arrows, of course, lining themselves up together. Seems like they're going to be utilizing each other's slipstream for that extra bit of top speed through those straights. And as we ride on board with them, we'll see how this goes. Mini-Turn seems to be the one who's going to be following on this occasion. Of course, one of the consequences to following a car so closely is the dirty air, which does affect you through the corners. So while you may gain on the straights, you got to be in that perfect Goldilocks zone. That's to not really suffer through the corners. So we'll ride on board with both these drivers and see how they progress and see how high up they can place themselves. A yellow flag in sector 2. It seems to be a Ferrari that was completely stopped out on track. It seems to be Saeed's Ferrari at the moment. Robin being in the pits at the moment. Trems and mini-turns currently sitting in P11 and P12 respectively. Both drivers would like to make a statement here, putting themselves quite high up on the grid. We'll see if their teamwork comes in handy. Trems getting a bit squirrely on the exit of that corner, and unfortunately goes extremely wide on that turn. And it seems like mini-turns does manage to go through completely cleanly. So now we'll have to see how Trems lines himself up to help Mini. And no, unfortunately, through those corners, it seems like Mini-Turns has had a moment and unfortunately invalidates his lap time. So both the Mercedes drivers have unfortunately invalidated their runs, and it's going to be a waste of tires there, as they're most likely going to head back into the pits. I don't think they're going to really have their tires really have enough to complete another lap. So that's most likely going to be it for the Mercedes team as of right now. Mr. Golden Flame, on the other hand, being one of the first few drivers to enter out onto the circuit, unfortunately invalidated his first run, would be looking to make a statement here and bounce right back, currently in P10. And this is the problem with one of these long laps. It's hard to keep a neat and tidy lap, and unfortunately, over the last corner, Mr. Golden Flame unfortunately invalidates his run, and that's going to be it for him. He's going to have to come back into the pits and switch onto another set of tires. Nine minutes left to go in the session, which may seem like a lot of time, but of course we got to remind ourselves that it's almost a 2-minute lap here, and drivers are going to need enough time to go back into the pits and switch on to new tires. So as we ride on board with them now, let's see who's going to come out on top. Bambino currently leading the charge on provisional pole with a 141.7. DRS Neil in the Aston Martin, however, not too far behind himself. Almost roughly a 10th behind at the moment, currently in the pits. And I believe it was Jaguar there who just set a lap time, 142.63. Very respectable. Places him right between the Ferraris. And Samet not too far behind him either, the Alpine teammate. Showing that he can kind of stick with his own, kind of hold his own. Sets a 143.1. He was P8, but loses out the position to Lucky High, who's now P8. 142.9 himself. Very respectable. And it looks like Bambino, your provisional pole sitter, has begun his run. Now coming down towards Eau Rouge. Bambino obviously needs to fight. It's a long lap, so there's a lot of time to find on a circuit like this. But of course, with such a long lap, as I was saying earlier, the chances to invalidate your run are just equally as high. Bambino's going to have to make sure that he keeps it nice and tight. He's unfortunately down through the first sector. Crofties, who's currently in P3 on a run of his own, has just begun his lap time. We'll keep a close eye on him. Now coming through this tight and twisty section, Bambino keeping it as close to the corners as he possibly can, riding the curbs as to allow himself to get a better run and a better exit out of those corners. Coming up to the fast left-hander now. He keeps it very nice and tight. He nearly goes off and nearly invalidates his run, but no, Bambino sticks in there. And coming towards the end of Sector 2, it looks like he's on a very impressive run. Hopefully the timing sheets reflect that, as Bambino is roughly a tenth up on his lap time, and it looks like he may have had a bit of a moment there, going a bit squirrely on the exit of that corner. And now with the long flat out section, he's going to be utilizing the slipstream advantage that he might have picked up from the Haas ahead of him, and now pushing towards the final two corners. A lot of time to be gained here if you can get it right just perfectly. And it looks like Bambino's actually going to choose to leave his run behind, decides to go back into the pits, abandons his lap time. And we'll switch our attention now over to Crofties, who is currently in P4. Robin managing to secure P3 for now, with 6 minutes left to go on the clock. And Crofties in his AlphaTauri, trying to make a statement himself. Blurry Julio, I believe, or it was maybe Cassell, who promoted himself pretty high up there. Lando Bot out of nowhere, setting a 141.5, a fantastic lap time from him. But now we'll bring our attention to Crofties, who comes across the line, sets a 142.0. It's not enough. Lando Bot, who I believe is, I don't know, at least the first time I'm commentating over him. Completely cutting the track. Hold on. Not too sure what that was about. Yeah, so just had to double check there. Of course, even if you are on an outlap like this, Landobot, you cannot be, of course, cutting the track as severely as you are over there. But we'll bring our attention back to the battle for qualifying. So Landobot currently leading the charge with a 141.5. Crofties now, I believe, going to be most likely coming into the pits at the end of this lap. Seidel Felasi currently in P6. Looks like he's just ended a run of his own. A very nice run from him. Both the Ferrari drivers being very close together. And of course, the Aston Martin team currently being in P1 and P3 respectively. With 4 minutes 30 seconds left to go on the clock, it's not much longer now before a lot of these drivers set out for their final few runs. Blurry Julio pushing the limits on his Williams. Nearly invalidated his run there. And as we ride on board with him now, coming through this last few corners, approaching the end of Sector 2, to see how much he's improved or hasn't improved by, and he has improved roughly by 3/10. Managed to set a purple Sector 2, 3/10 up on his current lap time. 142.1 wouldn't really move him too much higher up on the grid, but coming through the last few corners now, there still is time to gain. Now Blurry Julio coming through the final two corners, currently in P7. He's extremely squarely on the exit of that corner. That's going to lose him a bit of time. He comes across the line, and unfortunately he loses a significant amount of time. Stays in P7 and does not improve significantly on this occasion. But what is important to note is the top is 3 of the top 4 runners are now out for their outlaps. And one of them is about to begin theirs now. DRS Neil, currently in P3. A 141.8, 3/10 roughly off of his teammate. He would absolutely love it if he could have an Aston Martin lockout. And unfortunately, that's going to be the end of his run. DRS Neil unfortunately loses control of his car and drives straight into the wall there. And he's going to have to retire from qualifying. And unfortunately for him, it looks like the dream of the Aston Martin teammates locking out the front row will not take place. And now it's up to Bambino to spoil the party for the Aston Martin team. Himself being currently in P2, 141.7 being the time. Roughly 2/10 to beat. Landobot now out for his outlap. And is that drops of rain I see? As a matter of fact, it is. There are a few drops of rain out on track, and Bambino unfortunately invalidates his run, and he's going to have to rush back towards the pits if he's looking to complete his run. And with a few raindrops out on track, of course, track conditions do deteriorate as time continues. But how will this fare for a lot of these drivers with a bit of drops? I doubt nobody's going to really be improving anymore. Yellow flags and yellow sectors throughout the entire circuit. And of course, not much longer left in the session now. It doesn't really look like a lot of these drivers are going to be improving on this occasion. Robin seems to be going on a run for himself. But with these drops of rains, will he really be able to improve? We'll ride on board with him to see. There's a Mercedes stopped out on track. Sector 3, it seems. It's on the move now. 1 minute and 20 left to go in the session. That's what I wanted to see. Robin, unfortunately, 10 hundredths down on his current lap time. Maybe there is some time to give. And unfortunately, Bambino's also retired from the session, as a lot of these drivers are now calling it quits, realizing that there's no point in really setting a timed lap. The rain is coming down hard, and Robin is still pushing on his Ferrari. Cassell retires from the session as well now. And we'll see how he's doing through Sector 2. If he's really down on his lap time, we'll consider it the end of the session. A premature end, and it looks like it will be. Robin, unfortunately, 3.5 tenths down on his time and invalidates his run. And ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for the qualifying session here at Belgium. Landobot manages to secure pole position here. Unfortunately, cutting across the track significantly. So if anyone reports that, Lando will most likely will be receiving a penalty for that. But does manage to secure a provisional pole with a 141.5. Bambino managing to secure P2 with a 141.7. DRS Neil with a 141.8. Managing to secure P3. Robin in P4 with a 141.9. Unfortunately, no reason to complete his time run as he's slowly crawling towards the line. And Crofty's in P5 with a 142.0. Locks off the top 5 for the qualifying here at Belgium.
Despite the name, Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps is located in Stavelot, not Spa. Many world champions have fared well at Spa over the years. Michael Schumacher, Ed Senna, Jim Clark, Niki Lauda and Alan Prost, to name just a few, have enjoyed standing on the top steps of the podium. Spa's own layout is a great example of the lack of safety considerations and requirements of the time. It was and is still used as a public road. Aside from a few bales of hay, the circuit remained unchanged on a race weekend. The Eau Rouge corner is a favourite among fans, who have jokingly dubbed a similar corner on the Istanbul Park circuit, Eau Rouge. Spa was designed in 1920 by Jules Etier and Henri Langlois van Oppen. Originally, the track used public roads between the Belgian towns of Francorchamps, Malmedy and Stavelot. Despite Ferrari's success at Spa, Kimi Raikkonen's win here in 2009 will be the last victory that the Tifosi would taste until Sebastian Vettel led the Prancing horses to victory in 2018. A warm welcome to our spectators today from our Belgian locals to fans from around the world. Special guest Kimi Porter will be enjoying the weekend from his seat in Eau Rouge. class took 4 consecutive wins here at Spa.
Right then, ladies and gentlemen, only a few more moments now until we get the Belgian Grand Prix underway. It looks like we have some cloudy skies above us, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see a bit of rain at the start of the circuit, at the start of the race. And if it continues on through the latter half of this race, then we obviously are in store for an interesting strategy calls from the drivers. And of course, it'll be interesting to see who adapts the best to these treacherous conditions. Of course, you got to worry about the spray here on a track like this coming through a rouge, how slippery it can be. Drivers trying to go flat out there will have to be a bit reserved on the first few laps. So they'll be closely packed together, but regardless, as we've seen through Monza Turn 1, very surprisingly, drivers are extremely clean here. So, credit where credit is due, I suppose. But we all know how this game doesn't really give you a warning, so I'm not too sure when this race is exactly going to get right underway. And as I say that, we already are all set to get the Belgian Grand Prix underway. There's 5 red lights. It's lights out, and away we go here for the Belgian Grand Prix. Lando gets off to a very nice start, but Bambino absolutely sending it around the outside of the Aston Martin is going to be looking to make the move for the lead of the race, and already it seems like he's managed to get past him significantly. DRS Neil now following his close mate closely behind, and we can see a bit of action here developing between the Ferrari and the Williams. Unfortunately, nothing going yet, and nobody daring to go side by side through the first few opening laps over here as we go back to the front of the grid. Lando Bach closing in on Bambino for the lead of the race. He's taken towards the inside line. Doesn't have enough room over there. Decides to go right back into P2. And Lando's going to have to hold off just a little bit there as we can see the Williams of Blurry holding up Robin significantly. And Robin trying to etch his way through any way he possibly can. Looks towards maybe diving down the inside. Unfortunately, nothing doing yet. He can see an opening there as the Williams of Blurry goes extremely wide. They're both side by side heading towards this next corner with the inside line. The Williams manages to retain that lead and stays in P5. Robin staying currently in P6. A good chance now to take a look at what sort of tires the drivers are running. So it seems to be the medium tires seem to be the tire of choice to be using at the moment. And now Robin coming under fire from, it seems to be Mr. Golden Flame, who's sending it around the inside, now around the outside, and manages to make the move complete and promotes himself up to P6. And now Jaguar taking advantage of the compromised Robin, who has a bit of contact with the Alpine driver. Unfortunately for him, there's nothing that can stop these cars as they're all seemingly whizzing past the Ferrari. Unfortunately for Robin, he's dropping down significantly, and now another battle beginning to ensue over here between Cassell and Jaguar. Cassell having to go off the track there nearly. Will he send it down the inside? We'll have to see over here, but unfortunately for him, Jaguar manages to close the door quite sternly, and unfortunately he's not going to be able to make the move stick. And there's a bit of contact between both the Ferrari drivers and Cassell, as unfortunately Robin seems to have lost out there significantly, Sayed giving him the position back. But you do have to now wonder if anyone's suffering from any wing damage. Gaps beginning to increase at the front of the grid. Saeed and Trems now coming into a battle of their own. And we can actually see Jaguar and Mr. Golden Flame, who's had a massive incident. Unfortunately, he's in the wall, and we have a virtual safety car here in lap 2. Unfortunately, Mr. Golden Flame coming through Eau Rouge must have had some sort of a moment there, or some sort of collision with some driver as he drives into the wall there. And unfortunately for him, that is going to be the end of his race. And now we continue under the virtual safety car where drivers are not allowed to overtake each other, and they have to make sure they follow a certain speed limit through the course of the lap. Unlike a normal safety car, Bambino isn't the one who gets to dictate when they can go under racing. We'll see when race control starts waving the green flags. We can now take a chance to look over here around lap 10 to 14 is when these medium runners are going to be most likely coming into the pit. Seems like Landobot has actually managed to gain a bit of time on Bambino through these corners and through the virtual safety car. Mr. Golden Flame unfortunately leaving the session, and it's going to be the end of his run. Cassell, and interestingly enough, being the only driver at the moment who seemingly started off on the hard tire compound. As we're coming towards the end of lap 2, we do have green flags. Race control has now allowed us to go race under racing conditions once again. And an interesting look for Jaguar at the moment, who's only 4/10 off of Blurry. And DRS Neil, who's just only 3/10 off of his teammate. Race control has enabled DRS. And DRS Neil sticking with his teammate as closely as he can. I apologize, I needed to take a sip of water there. We'll bring our attention to Jaguar, who is now currently side by side with Blurry, taking the outside line as he's managed to catch up significantly through Eau Rouge. Jaguar does have the advantage of the DRS, so there's nothing Blurry can necessarily do here. Unfortunately, he's going to lose out on the position and drop down to P6. Looking a bit further down the grid, we can see Robin closing that gap to Cassell. Of course, the incident earlier involving both the Ferrari teammates and the Alfa Romeo driver. And Robin now only 2/10 behind Cassell, basically pushing the Alfa Romeo along. He's going to really be looking for any opportunity he gets to really send it down the inside. He can see Cassell going a bit wide on the exit of that corner there. Maybe seeing it as an opportunity to really push himself forward. He's really forcing the Alfa Romeo into making some sort of mistake here. And maybe this is his opportunity now, coming through towards the flat-out section. Robin's going to have to hope that he has enough ERS and enough of a slipstream advantage to really catch up to Cassell. And you can see the gap ever so slowly coming down between both these drivers. Will it really be enough? Coming towards the chicane now. Will Robin send it down the inside? No, he does not. He decides to back out of it at the final second. Decides to stay behind him for now. Bambino, of course, managing to set the... No, Jaguar managing to set the fastest time of the race, 1:45.4. And while Robin has his hands full here, Trems is absolutely filling up the rearview mirrors of Saeed Al-Falassi, who's now desperately trying to keep the Mercedes behind him. But for how long? Both the Ferraris are under some sort of pressure here, as we can see Robin trying to make the overtake and Saeed trying to prevent one. And we can see Robin right ahead, taking towards the inside line. DRS wide open, and he manages to make the move stick and promotes himself up into P7. Trems managing to get past Saeed and promotes himself up into P9. Gap staying pretty much consistent near the front of the grid. Landobot keeping the gap to around roughly 5 to 7/10. And even though drivers aren't particularly super close to each other, we're only still in lap 4 of 22, so a lot more racing in store for us here today. It's important to note Cassell is on the hard tires as well. His tires are definitely going to be lasting a lot longer than some of his competitors. So he's going to hopefully be using that and be, of course, on the tire advantage heading towards the end of the race. We'll see how that fares for him. And an interesting development here is now that Trems is closing in on Cassell. So both drivers sandwiched by the Ferraris are now looking to switch positions between themselves. And Trems is ever slowly gaining on the Alfa Romeo. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like he's going to really be close enough to make the overtake stick heading into the final 2 corners, but you know, he's going to try to line himself up as he's basically bumper to bumper with the Alfa Romeo ahead of him. DRS wide open. Will it be enough to catch up to him towards the end of turn 1? No, it will not. But now, what Trems needs to do is line himself up absolutely perfectly to get a fantastic run out of that corner. And now heading down towards Eau Rouge. He's going to be slowly gaining on the Alfa Romeo driver ahead of him. And he's going to be looking to utilize that slipstream. And now after coming through Eau Rouge, you can already see Bambino's already lost out of position near the front of the grid. A fantastic move is building here that I really didn't want to miss. But it looked like Bambino has lost out the position to Landobot and has dropped down into P2. So while we were focusing on an overtake, unfortunately for us, it seems like Bambino's had some sort of moment there. Unfortunately, loses out the position. And now how will your race leader bounce back now? Ex-race leader now, I should say. We saw the gap being rather consistent when Landobot was following Bambino. We have a yellow flag in Sector 2. It seems to be a Red Bull that's going extremely slowly there. And already we can see Bambino really catching up to the Aston Martin of Landobot. Will Landobot give him the space? He has no other choice to. The Red Bull of Bambino taking towards the inside line. Unfortunately for him, that wasn't the correct line to take. And now Landobot basically pulling that Red Bull along. Bambino's definitely going to make a move. Heading towards the inside line. Takes towards the outside. Decides to back out of the corner for now. And is extremely sandwiched between the Aston Martins at this moment. Even the tiniest mistake can cost either one of these drivers. And Bambino's looking to make sure that that isn't him. Coming through turn 1 now. You can see how wide Landobot has gone. Both drivers are almost side by side with each other. Is Bambino going to send a move through Eau Rouge? It doesn't look like he has enough speed to really stay side by side with the Aston Martin. He's going to have to stay back for now. And now coming through Eau Rouge, we can see Bambino sticking as closely as possible with the Aston Martin. DRS wide open now. Side by side with the Aston Martin. Landobot unfortunately drops that right down into P2 and gets overtaken by his own teammate. DRS Newell manages to come through and overtake his teammate and promote himself up into P2. And now it seems to be DRS Newell who's going to be on the charge towards the Red Bull. Some politics going on in between the teammates. And it looks like DRS Newell now is going to make his charge and try to catch out Bambino. It might have been the smoothest switch I have seen between two-tier drivers. League drivers. That was fantastic. If it was coordinated. And it looks like he's relatively maintaining the same gap that Landobot had, roughly 5/10. But DRS Newell does not look to be doesn't seem to be dropping off from Bambino either. The top 3 runners being extremely close to each other. And of course, DRS Newell a bit too far back on this occasion to maybe make a dive down the inside of Bambino, but will like to line himself up as there seemed to be a bit of contact between the Aston Martin and the Red Bull driver. DRS Newell getting squirrely and all sorts of out of shape, heading on the exit of that corner. But he's going to try to line himself up so he can get a really good run and try to catch up to Bambino on this occasion. In lap 7 of 22. Will DRS Newell be able to do what Lando could not and manage to overtake and maintain Bambino right behind him? We'll have to see as he goes extremely wide on that corner, but does manage to get a good run. DRS wide open now, and DRS Newell not necessarily going to have any resistance from Bambino as he makes that move look easy and promotes himself up into P1. And now here's the difficult challenge that we saw Lando struggling in, of course, was keeping Bambino behind him. A bit of overtaking action in the middle of the grid. Robin managing to promote himself up into P7, getting past the Williams of Blurry. Well, we'll keep our attention towards this battle happening near the front of the grid, and for the lead of this race, a driver who has a brilliant view on the entire race itself is Bambino and DRS Newell. Is Lando on Bambino and DRS Newell. Four and a half tenths separating Bambino at the moment. Of course, through Eau Rouge is really where these drivers get a chance to overtake each other, being the longest DRS straight on the track at the moment. and providing a great overtaking opportunity at the end of it as well. Bambino lining himself up for a nice exit out of this corner. A nice exit is what he's gotten. DRS wide open. We have a yellow flag in Sector 2. It seems to be the Mercedes of mini turns, who's had unfortunately a sort of a moment there. He seems to be on the move, so unluckily for us, no virtual safety car, but Bambino now bumper to bumper with the Aston Martin. It doesn't look like Bambino's really going to take that risk of going side by side through Eau Rouge, but he's definitely going to be pushing the Aston Martin along, as there may have been a bit of contact there. DRS wide open once again, and it doesn't look like DRS Neil is really going to have much of a choice but to really let the Red Bull of Bambino go, as he tried to fight it by the looks of it. Most likely used a considerable amount of his battery to keep up with the Red Bull there. But Bambino is just unable to lose the Aston Martins at the current moment. Blurry, Julio, and Robin coming into a battle of their own, side by side with each other. The Ferrari around the outside, a fantastic move from Robin, as he manages to retain P6. I'm glad I came back and got a good view of that. As the battle for the lead of the race continues, DRS Neil drops down 7/10. And Trems now, you can see, trying to catch up to Blurry, trying to get past him as well. 3/10 separating these drivers. Lap 10 to 14 is when we saw the medium runners are most likely going to be coming in for their pit stop. And that's exactly when Cassell is most likely going to be faster than the rest of the grid. So he's just biding his time. It's not his race at the moment. Mini turns, unfortunately, picking up a 3-second penalty. Let's bring our attention towards the front of the grid once again. DRS Neil and Lando Bach close together on this occasion, trying to close the gap to Bambino. And it looks like Robin has had... oh, never mind. Robin went into the pits. That makes sense. And unfortunately for DRS Neil, 7/10 behind his team, behind his the race leader. It doesn't look like he's going to really be close enough on this occasion to catch up and close that gap and make a move for the lead of the race. Bambino doing a fantastic job in maintaining that gap to the drivers behind him. Meanwhile, Trems closing the gap to Blurry. DRS wide open. Both drivers side by side heading towards this corner. And it looks like Trems is going to get the move done right on time. Promotes himself up into P6. Robin now, of course, out of the pits. And on a fresh set of hard tires, will be looking to make it towards the end of the race. Attempting an undercut here. And a big development is now that DRS Neil is now outside a second from Bambino. He did have his opportunities, and he did manage to take the lead of the race only for a short while. Unfortunately for him, it just wasn't enough. Now he's beginning to drop down from the Red Bull driver. A few interesting developments near the back of the grid. Hallinan roughly a 10.5 off of Said El-Falasi, who after that incident with Robin does not look like he's really recovered in the race. Currently sitting in P11. Wouldn't be too happy with his current situation. DRS Neil managing to get back within that DRS gap. So what's important to note here is that if he actually has DRS, which he does, Bambino really pushing the limits on that Red Bull, trying to go as far as possible. Crofty's now coming into the pits to switch off of his medium tires. DRS Neil 1.1 seconds off of Bambino. And it doesn't look like he's going to have DRS coming through this straight. And that's going to heavily compromise him towards his teammate. Lando Bot now with DRS wide open. Hopefully won't receive a whole lot of resistance from his teammate as he manages to make the easy overtake and promotes himself up into P2. And now begins the charge towards the Red Bull driver. Bambino is now going to fight off a driver that he's pretty familiar with from the start of this race, Lando Bot, who was on pole position through qualifying. Cassell managing to get extremely close to Blurry on that occasion. And Hallinan managing to get past Said El-Falasi, as that move had been building up for the last lap. And this is really now where Cassell's tires are coming to life, so he can really start pushing his car and trying to get past some of these medium runners. Obviously, will be on the faster tire near the end of this race. As Lando picks up a 3-second time penalty for track invalidations, and that's going to heavily compromise them. Luckily for the Aston Martin drivers, they're 8 seconds ahead of their nearest competitor. But Lando, of course, would have not wanted that if he wanted to get past Bambino easily, which I think has proven to be pretty difficult as things stand on their own. And DRS Neil heading into the pits. Decides to let his teammate continue to go at Bambino. Decides to continue and try his luck at possibly getting past him, hopefully through this DRS section. 5.5 tenths separating him and Bambino. And he's gaining through the slipstream. You can just see him closing the gap through Eau Rouge. A massive amount of time gained, and he may not necessarily even need DRS to get the move done. Lando manages to promote himself up in a P1, and Bambino can't really do much about it. Unfortunately, he loses out the position, and will have to stick behind him for a considerable portion of this lap, unless Lando, of course, makes a mistake. A lot of drivers now have headed into the pits to switch off of their medium tires. Cassell managing to benefit from this and remaining to stay on his hard tires that he started the race with, now up to P5. The safety car would do him wonders. Blurry Julio now extremely close to Trems. In lap 11 of 22, only 11 more laps to go. Just doesn't look like he's close enough on this occasion. But Bambino, however, has not lost out to Lando whatsoever. He has managed to stay extremely close to him, knows that his tires are coming to an end, and hence doesn't really need to save them any longer, can really push his car to the absolute limit. Blurry Julio, of course, picking up a 3-second time penalty, unfortunately for track invalidations. And now, the big question, will Lando or Bambino come into the pits this lap? And it looks like they will. Both drivers follow each other right into the pits. Bambino looks at a possible overtaking opportunity through there, but unfortunately cannot get it done. And now, it's up to both the Red Bull pit team and the Aston Martin pit team to get these pit stops down absolutely perfectly. Bambino switches onto a soft tires. Lando now getting through his pit stop. Will he get overtaken by Bambino? It doesn't look like he will. Switches onto a hard tire compound. A bold strategy choice from Bambino to switch onto the softs. And we'll see how this fares for him. Trends, of course, in the Mercedes also on a set of softs. And now Bambino chasing Lando through Eau Rouge on his new set. Of course, we'll have the tire advantage and the slipstream advantage. DRS wide open. Not much that Lando can necessarily do here to stop this overtake from taking place. And Bambino promotes himself up into P3. Castellan is now leading this race after running his hard tires for 11 laps. Unfortunately for DRS Neil, that undercut not necessarily paying off as he stays behind his teammate. Doesn't manage to get through. Robin looking to make some overtakes. Bambino, on the other hand, looking to get past these drivers as soon as possible with his soft tire compound. Manages to descend it down the inside of Blurry Julio and manages to make the overtake stick. Promotes himself up into P2 and would like to get past Cassell relatively quickly. Obviously, staying behind Cassell is only really going to hold him up, though that slipstream advantage will definitely help Bambino in extending that gap to Lando, who of course has a Williams in between him and the Red Bull driver. Bambino, unfortunately, not being close enough to really make the move on this occasion, but does manage to get past Cassell relatively easily. DRS wide open now, and the gap between Lando and Bambino being 1.2 seconds, 1.3 now. Really pushing his car to the absolute limit. And an interesting development here is that Crofties is extremely near DRS Neil. Our driver who seemingly was out of the fight for the podium has all of a sudden brought himself right back into it. And after that fantastic pit stop he had earlier, laps sooner than the rest of the grid, he's of course now managed to close the gap significantly. The only question is, of course, will he be able to stay there? Robin trying to close the gap to Jaguar. And unfortunately for him, he's just going to be too far back to make the move. We'll have to stay patient for now. Blurry going past Samet. Mixes of hards and softs, and Kepler being the only one on the medium tires at the moment, currently in P15. Unfortunately for him, not a fantastic race for now. Who's to say what could happen with 9 laps left to go? We could still have easily a safety car. Landobot's gap now down to 2.1 seconds. Bambino really pushing his softs as hard as he can to really extend that gap as far as he can. Though I'm not too sure if the softs were really the right call, if they'll make it to the end or not. And even if they will, what sort of condition will they be in? Bambino, of course, managing to set the fastest lap time of the race with a 1:44.9. And Cassell getting extremely close to Trems. Oh no, DRS Neil also picking up a 3-second time penalty. And all of a sudden, both Aston Martin drivers are unfortunately gonna have to pick up those penalties and deal with them. They do switch positions, and DRS Neil now deciding to take the charge towards Bambino. We'll like to see if he can close that gap anytime soon. But unfortunately for them, that 3-second time penalty is gonna cost them dearly. Cassell managing to get past Trems, of course. And as we watch this battle for the lead of the race, of course, Bambino has extended his gap to 2.8 seconds. But with still a considerable amount of this race left to go, it still begs in the question that were the softs really the right call to make? I guess we'll have to see. 3 seconds now is the gap. Jaguar looked to be getting a bit squirrely on the exit of that corner. He's trying to close the gap to himself to Robin. Would like to take that top 5 position and earn double-digit points. Landobot getting very close to his teammate, and Crofty's getting very interested as well. Even though teammates aren't necessarily fighting each other, or maybe they are, we can see DRS and Landobot coming into a battle now. And Landobot managing to make the move stick and promotes himself up into P2. DRS Neil drops down into P3, and now Crofty's might be getting an opportunity here to make a move on the Aston Martin drivers. Unfortunately, being the last car on the DRS train is never a great thing. But he is slowly gaining. DRS wide open now, and once again, will the Aston Martin switch positions? It looks like they will. DRS Neil manages to make the move and promotes himself up into P2. And Landobot gets a bit out of shape on the exit of that corner, potentially ruining his run here, but Crofties cannot capitalize. Seven laps to go now. And if you're just joining us, we've only had one virtual safety car after, of course, Mr. Golden Flame did not finish the race. It's been an interesting battle for first place. Bambino obviously on a set of 3-lap-old softs. And DRS Neil and Landobot currently trying to catch the Red Bull driver and potentially have a 1-2 finish for their team. Yellow flag. And who is that car? It seems to be... Who is that? It is Mini Turns. He has DNF from this race. It is a virtual safety car out on track. No full-fledged safety car. But interestingly enough, DRS Neil deciding to go into the pits and switching off of this tire compound. This is a bold move from the Aston Martin driver. He's definitely going to lose out on a few positions here to the drivers behind him. Or is he really? Has DRS Neil pulled off the absolutely perfect strategy? Loses out of position to Robin. And it looks like Robin is the only driver he's going to really lose a position to. DRS Neil pulling off a fantastic late move. A late call there to come into the pits to switch onto the soft tire compounds. And now, with only 6 laps left to go, has prepared himself to make a charge for the lead of this race. I don't think anybody was anticipating DRS Neil going into the pits there. And this may have been a brilliant late call from the Aston Martin driver. Only time will tell now. Of course, we're back under racing conditions. And the gap to Bambino being 3.9 seconds from Lando. Neil would like to get past Robin as soon as possible as well. Of course, Robin's gap to Crofty is being roughly 11 seconds at the moment. And you can just see the grip advantage the Aston Martin has over the Ferrari. Robin having no other choice but to give way. And DRS Neil making it look easy, promotes himself up into P4. And now begins the hunt for P3. 6 laps left to go. Obviously, it's important to remember DRS Neil does have his 3-second time penalty. So as long as Bambino can keep a nice, clean race, it doesn't look like he's really going to have anything to worry about. Granted, the 3 drivers behind him all have penalties. But we'll keep an eye on the charge DRS Neil is pulling here. Robin also trying to stick with Neil as much as possible. Utilize the advantage of the slipstream and the DRS. Massive gaps between the drivers, so why not just watch this charge that we may get to witness here. We're counting down the laps now. 5 laps left to go. The gap, which was initially 11 seconds, has now come down to 9. Neil is going to have no other choice but to leave it all out on the track today. Lando's gap being roughly 4 seconds to Bambino now. Those 5-lap old softs must really be feeling the burn at this point. Eight-second gap. Time coming down ever so slowly. A driver that's extremely close to his the opponent in front of him is Jaguar, who's now going to send it down the inside of the Joker cycle. Both drivers come into contact with each other, and unfortunately Jaguar spins his car out and drives into the wall there. Luckily for him, he does not manage to lose. It doesn't look like he's experienced any massive amounts of damage though, and it doesn't look like we have any virtual safety cars as of yet. The race continues, and DRS Neil bringing his gap down to 7.6 seconds. And another yellow flag through sector 2 and 3. A massive incident looking over there, but luckily for us, it seems like all drivers are still moving. So thankfully, we don't have anything to worry about. DRS Neil, of course, setting the fastest lap time of the race with a 1:44.7. That was bound to happen. And the gap, which was 11 down to 9, then 8, all of a sudden now is just down to 6 seconds. Oh, well, 6.5. Four more laps. Meanwhile, Hallinan closing the gap to the Lucky High. Of course, this is for P10 and his points. Hallinan would like to capitalize on that. Watching DRS Neil's time at the moment as well. 6.5 seconds being the gap to Crofty's. We'll watch that come down. Hallinan, DRS wide open, and Lucky High getting out of the way to break the slipstream. Pays off for him. Hallinan stays in P11. Said, unfortunately, who had a terrible start to his race, now down in P14. And unfortunately, things go from bad to worse as he drives off into the gravel trap and unfortunately drives into the barrier there. Luckily, he still is moving And it doesn't look like we're going to get a virtual safety car or a safety car on this occasion. And that allows the run to continue. DRS Neil now bringing that gap down to 5 seconds. Saeed, of course, suffering from severe wing damage there, and with 4 laps left to go. Fortunately, I think that's going to be the end of his run. Lando now 4.7 seconds behind Bambino. That gap's just getting bigger and bigger. Crofty is now coming into the pits to switch onto the hard tire, switch off of his hard tires. And DRS Neil now has free air to catch up to Landobot, his teammate. We saw these drivers respectfully exchanging positions between each other. As unfortunately Saeed once again goes off the track, and we have a virtual safety car. Once again, another virtual safety car there, and that is due to Saeed Al-Falasi unfortunately going off the track and getting involved in some sort of incident. And with 4 laps left to go, what an interesting development this is. DRS Neil, who was on an absolute charge, unfortunately is going to have to slow himself down and maybe try to play the safety car to its advantage and try to close that gap to Lando. Of course, the gap being at the moment 9.7 seconds. I'm going to go extremely slowly through that corner there. Trems unfortunately picks up a 3-second time penalty. Second race control gives us the green light. We're back under racing conditions. And a significant portion of the third last lap, unfortunately, has gone to waste. .8 seconds being the gap now, and now we can go back under racing conditions. Robin unfortunately picks up a drive-through penalty, and that's going to hinder his time significantly. He's going to lose out on a significant amount of positions there. DRS Neil now once again on the charge. 3-lap-old softs against 8-lap-old hards and softs, and with only 2 or 3 laps left to go, one has to wonder if Neil really has enough time. Of course, Robin coming through and serving that drive-through penalty, loses out on so many positions. There's drops down from P4 and down to P9. He must be frustrated after that. And interestingly, Lando has brought his gap down, and Hallinan's actually retired from the session. It looks like he's retired within the pits. Thankfully, it looks like we're not going to be having another virtual safety car or a safety car at the moment. Looks like Jaguar was able to get past Lucky High and promote himself up into P10 to secure the final points position here on the grid. Kepler going into the pits now. Switches onto a soft tire compound, maybe to possibly steal the final fastest lap away from, I believe it was DRS Neil. And it looks like those soft tires aren't really helping him too much anymore, as he's not really able to close the gap to Lando at the moment. It's been around the 8.5 second mark for quite a while. Interestingly, Lando has managed to kind of gain on Bambino. Bambino's 9-lap-old softs looking like they're entering their limit, as Lando through almost every corner, I was gonna say, is looking like he's gaining time. Doesn't look like he gained through turn 1. Saeed seems to have gone off track there. Luckily for him, he didn't destroy his car. And as I say that, Saeed Al-Falasi has retired from the session after colliding with the wall. Really is a case of the commentator's curse. My apologies, Said. I'm sorry to do that to you. But here at the penultimate lap, here at Spa, we've had a fantastic race as it's been. Of course, loads of overtakes, loads of racing, and some very interesting strategy calls as we saw under the virtual safety car from DRS Neil, and throughout the entire race, really a bunch of undercuts and just a great race overall. Doesn't really look like Lando's going to be able to close the gap to Bambino unless Bambino commits a horrific mistake at this point in the race. Another yellow flag in Sector 2. It seems to be the McLaren who had it waved on them. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we begin the final lap here at Spa. 22 laps around this beautiful circuit. A minute 40 being the length of each lap. So we've been here for a considerable amount of time, but can't be too disappointed. Of course, Lando now closing the gap to Bambino, but of course with his penalties, there's really not much he can do. And speaking of penalties, why not take a look at what some of the drivers have, unfortunately. So almost every driver on the grid experiencing one track invalidation, other than Kepler, who's unfortunately picked up 2. Good on DRS Neil for being one of the only drivers in the top 10 to really pull off a 2-stop. And that too securing a podium with it. And though he had a great strategy call and a great run, and could have given us a fairy tale ending, unfortunately, it just wasn't enough. And Spa really drains those tires. They don't last too long here. Of course, these high-speed corners provide so much wear and tear to these poor tires that they'll go away a lot sooner than you expect, especially if you're pushing to the degree that DRS Neil was. But alas, you cannot take away from what was a fantastic race for this man. Flashing red light, signifying the end of his ERS. Really has given everything that he had out here on the track. Of course, that is Bambino, the Red Bull driver. Fantastic race for him, coming through the final corner now. And with DRS wide open, heads to across the line and wins the Belgian Grand Prix. Lando comes across the line. A fantastic race for him. Comes across the line, finishes in P2. DRS Neil, not too far behind himself, will come across the line and finish in P3. And what a fantastic race it was for these top 3 winners. And of course, a great result for the Aston Martin team, finishing in P2 and P3 respectively. Crofties comes across the line and finishes in P4. Cassell falls soon right after, finishing up in P5 as he drives into the wall there. Blurry Julio coming across and finishing in P6. And actually gets dropped down into P7 after Samet gets promoted up into P6. Joker Psycho in P8. Robin, of course, after serving his drive-through, kind of dropped down significantly. Does climb up a position after Psycho's penalties to P8. Psycho in P9 and Jaguar in P10. And what a fantastic race we've had here today. So then, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to be all from me today. And Fantan from, of course, Tier 2 with a fantastic race as we witnessed. Of course, Jag Bambino picking up his first race win of the season, and we'll be looking to definitely get a few more under his belt as we head down to Saudi Arabia next time around. And hopefully, of course, I hope to see you all there, and I'm sure we'll have a fantastic race. Thank you all so much for watching and tuning in.